My adventure begins on a bad day made worse by Nurgle's blight. In character creation, I choose a short king as my protagonist. Big surprise. I never beat the game as Beast, so I chose him as my character. Beast was the cousin of the Dwarven Queen, Justinia, but after failing a coup, she banished him to Azkaban. He killed everyone on the island, stole their boat, and became a pirate, but was captured by the Divine Order for blasphemy. After spending most of my natural life deciding on a hair color, I moved on to stats. I chose Knight as my class for two-handed weapons, dumped my attribute points into Strength, my combat points into Warfare, and my civil point into Persuasion. In quotation marks. For my talent, I chose Lone Wolf, thus doubling all my stats, and turning my character into a nigh unkillable murder hobo. And lastly, for my instrument, I chose the cello. With that, I'm ready to begin my adventure. I awake and find myself in a Bethesda intro.
Hey, you! You're finally awake.
After being released from my constraints, I begin exploring the prison boat I'm aboard, starting with the lower decks. Like all prison boats, it has a sheep stable. I stumble across the brig where a fellow sorcerer is imprisoned and guarded by a singular unarmed magister sleeping during his shift. He wakes up to the sight of a 4-foot-tall lunatic frothing at the mouth and thinks, it's a good idea to tell him to square up. How unfortunate. For him.
Wham.
After dealing with him, I set the prisoner free. After witnessing me crush a magister's skull in my bare hands, the prisoner has the same idea and tells me to square up.
Say your prayers while you've breath to speak them, lad. The halls await.
Eventually, I make my way to the second deck. Magister Siwan forces me into a social interaction, and once I'm free of her, I take note of a crime scene in the hallway. A sorcerer lies dead, reduced to chunky salsa by yet another sorcerer. I continue to the main room and encounter a plethora of characters, all of which I'll ignore. The sole exception is Lose, my only companion for the playthrough. Mid-conversation...
Alright, adios.
Her eyes cloud to an unnatural black. Greyish veins run down her face, and her mouth tightens into a cruel sneer.
So anyway, I went to the office only to be faced with a... situation. The sorcerer, who turned the other sorcerer into chunky salsa, was being apprehended by the Magisters. She threatens me, effortlessly takes off her enchanted restraints, then casts the spell. Fortunately, I survived. Unfortunately, none of the Magisters did. With their deaths, I lost the chance to have the satisfaction of ending them myself and converting their life force into delicious XP to grow more powerful. I search the room for any gear I can find. I find a rusty, cracked, broken sword drenched in piss, but even half-broken weapon is enough to clear the boat. Perhaps the rusty blade will give my enemies tetanus. On the third deck, I find a Sourcehound, kill a Sourcehound, and declare the Anti-Magister Crusade on two unlucky schmucks hiding in their bedroom, crying for mercy. After completing 2 steps on my holy quest, I head to the upper deck in search of a lifeboat. Immediately after climbing the stairs, a Magister was crushed by a Kraken, and I was assaulted by Voidwoken. So I assaulted Voidwoken. Finally, I made it to the lifeboat, but the only people there were a child and a dwarf who left his balls back at home and insisted we leave the others behind. I call him a bitch and rush to the lower decks, because I'm a hero. In typical heroic fashion, I took a short detour to harvest organs for cannibalistic elves and execute Magister Siwan while she was unconscious. Just as I made it back to the main room to help everyone to the lifeboat, the Voidwoken attacked. 6 magical and trained killers. With the Voidwoken defeated, the other sorcerers and I rushed to the lifeboat, just in time for me to be knocked on my ass by a Kraken and left for dead aboard a sinking ship. But as I sank to the bottom of the ocean, I heard a voice.
I have plans for you, child. Rise.
After getting knocked unconscious for the 3rd time that day, the effects of CTE led to severe discombobulation, and while disoriented, I lost my pirate hat. With murderous rage in my heart, I searched for any unfortunate soul I could vent my frustration on. Fortunately, I came across Voidwoken along the coast on my way to Fort Joy, and reducing them to a pulpy mess in the sand was very cathartic. It wasn't long before I arrived at Fort Joy. I met Dallas, a psychotic anthropomorphic hammer, and Alexander, the biggest wimp in all of Middle-earth. But maybe Dallas isn't so bad, because she orders her subordinate Atusa to cut out her tongue, blasts her with a Kamehameha, and leaves a bloody mess on Fort Joy's porch. Naturally, I do the only logical thing, and stuff Atusa's disembodied leg directly into my backpack so that we can feed it to the knife-eared leaf lover later to absorb Atusa's memories. After this pleasant welcome to Fort Joy, I realize it's not as bad as I expected, because the first thing I noticed was a shakedown for protection money by a gang running a prison-wide extortion racket directly in front of the guards, who did nothing. One of the sorcerers I saved on the boat stepped in to defend the elf. Seeing a fight about to start, I diplomatically instigated a fight to the death. Thanking me for defending her, although I simply was relishing in the bloodshed, the elf directed me to a cave where I'd find sanctuary and assistance, so I immediately went looking for the next thing to kill. But if I were to sustain my murder hobo lifestyle, I'd need a companion, just in case the unfortunate happenstance occurred of me dying in horrific agony. So I found the woman I met on the boat and started a conversation. She too sank to the bottom of the ocean, but like me, was saved by the schizophrenic hallucination voices inside her head. However, there was something else inside her mind, an evil spiritual entity, possessing her mind and spurring her to acts of inhumane sadism. The perfect companion. With a homicidal schizophrenic to provide contrast to my bloodthirsty psychopath, I felt more prepared for the next fight. I found a group of sketchy crackheads playing poker, and after losing a game of poker to them, they demanded I pay up my bet, which I never agreed to or was informed of. In response, they decided to take it, by force. With my strength and Lose's magic, I was burned alive and subjected to premature cremation. Lose used a resurrection scroll to pull my soul from the depths of hell, and from there, we tore the card players limb from limb. With my bloodlust sated, temporarily, I went to the cave the elf pointed me to. Just outside was a man bleeding to death, and I heroically left him to die because he's a jerk. Inside the cave, a child immediately insisted on playing hide-and-seek with me. He ran away to hide behind a box, and I realized this child must have worse brain damage than I do to hide so poorly. I eventually found him a second time, and he introduced me to his imaginary friend, a 1,000-year-old skeleton, pinned to the wall by a cursed spear, and suffering in eternal agony. His name was Lord Withermore. He was once a source hunter tasked with defeating Brachus Rex, basically this setting's Dark Lord, but was defeated himself, and cursed with the worst fate imaginable.
Take him to Detroit. No! No, not Detroit! No! No, please!
Enduring the ramblings of a retarded child.
Hey, don't you have any money for shoes? Did the Crips beat you up and take yours too? They took mine, and now my dad only buys me cheap ones from Payless.
After removing the spear in his chest, he was finally able to move for the first time in a millennia. He was overwhelmed with suicidal ideation and asked me to kill him, but bashing him repeatedly in the head would not suffice. I needed to destroy his lich phylactery, a jar of honey. I returned to the cave and spoke with a blind elf. Before I could get a word out, Lose stopped me and asked to speak to the elf herself. Noticing her eyes turning black, I saw no issue and let her go ahead. Moments later, her voice changed,
Chatty elf.
and she gave us a recipe for a gourmet meal. Elf flesh, boiled in blood and marinated in adrenochrome. Everyone in the cave, myself included, jumped Lose and beat her within an inch of her life. This suppressed the demon possessing her, and we continued on our way. Hearing about the demon's exquisite cooking made us hungry, so we went to Fort Joy's kitchen. Lose and I gave the cook our orders and realized he's a total asshole. It turns out this guy is Griff, the leader of the prison-wide extortion racket, and the boss of the 2 thugs I killed in my first 5 minutes at Fort Joy. I considered killing Griff then and there, but hadn't accumulated enough XP from the souls of my previous victims to pose a genuine threat. So I added Griff to my shit list, alongside every other Magister to ever draw breath. Then I remembered I never actually spoke to the elf I saved from Griff's thugs, so I returned to the cave. We had a productive conversation, and she gave me the incredible insight that she doesn't know shit, can't do shit, and I should talk to Sahila instead. The elf Lose attacked earlier. Fortunately, Sahila's lack of functional eyes prevented her from recognizing our faces, so I adopted the most nasal voice I could.
There's nothing here any of us are going to use. There's that, I guess. I'll take that.
And asked her for advice on escaping Fort Joy. Her friend was captured by Griff, but I still didn't have enough XP to kill him and everyone else in his kitchen, so I explored the island for quests and victims to grow more powerful.